Hey everyone, this is Nick, and if you're wondering what happened in the Linux and open source world, well, you've come to the right place, because this is your weekly Linux and open source news video. This week we have GNOME developers starting a discussion on whether GTK 5 should drop support for X11 entirely. We have Firefox having a seemingly minor update, but that's really important for privacy. And we have a ton of new laptops running Linux out of the box from various manufacturers. And as always, we've got the KDE updates, the GNOME updates, the Linux Mint updates, elementary OS updates, and a lot more things to discuss. So let's get going right after I tell you everything about our sponsor. Thanks to Linode for sponsoring this video. Linode is my favorite solution to run a Linux or gaming server. It's what I use to run my own Nextcloud instance and my own OnlyOffice server. The interface is super easy to use. They are affordable, they have tons of documentation online, and they have one-click deployable servers for a ton of applications or games. For example, Focal Board. If you don't know about it, it's an open source alternative to tools like Trello, Asana, or Notion. It lets you create milestones, keep track of your notes, have a bird's eye view of your projects, and it basically helps you get stuff done. And you can deploy your Focal Board server in one click from your Linode dashboard, something I should probably do to ensure that I keep delivering my videos on time. And to get you started, Linode is giving you $100 of free credit to get your own Linux server or gaming server running. To get access to that, just click the link in the description below. GNOME developers are wondering whether they should drop support for X11 in GTK 5, the next major release of the toolkit that serves to build GNOME applications. Now don't panic, it's just a proposition for now, and since GTK 4 is only about a year old, and it took 10 years to go from GTK 3 to GTK 4, it's not exactly imminent or even guaranteed to happen. The rationale behind the conversation is that X11 is stuck. It's not evolving, it's not improving, and Wayland is already at a point where most people can use it, apart from a few specific edge cases or hardware devices. The discussion started on GNOME's GitLab and has since been locked, as the developer who initiated it is expecting a, let's put it mildly, shitstorm of comments. This would be pretty much in keeping with GNOME's philosophy of always pushing forward a platform, even if it involves leaving behind stuff that they don't consider worth supporting anymore. Personally, I have a nuanced viewpoint on the matter. I still do use X11 on my desktop because Nvidia support is just not ready and some games just do not run at all on Wayland where they work fine with X11. But on the other hand, Wayland is absolutely perfect on every other device I tried that doesn't use Nvidia GPUs. And I think that in 5 to 10 years, when GTK 5 is actually released, there's no reason to think it won't be perfect at all. So I think it's an interesting move, and it might let GNOME or GTK developers focus more on new features that Wayland can support instead of being held back by stuff that X11 will never be able to do. The amazing kid who started work back on Unity 7 has published a new version for this desktop environment, version 7.6. While this version was already available for testing since the end of April, it's now officially available, with a host of changes to make the desktop more modern and up to today's standards. The dash and the HUD have been redesigned to look more modern, and Unity now has accent colors and an updated theme list. In the dash previews, the application's information and ratings you got by right-clicking an app are now fixed. The dash has improved rounded corners, and all the source code has been migrated to GitLab and compiles on Ubuntu 22.04. Finally, the whole design is now flatter while keeping the system-wide blur. The docs menus and tooltips have been updated to look more modern. The low graphics mode is now a lot more efficient, and the whole interface got a speed boost. And RAM usage has been reduced to about 700 to 800 megabytes in Ubuntu Unity 22.04. You can get that update immediately on Ubuntu Unity 22.04, and if you're uncertain about how Ubuntu Unity still holds up, you can watch my review in one of these corners. It was before that update, but spoiler, it's still pretty good. There's a very interesting blog post on the Fedora magazine website about a new virtual assistant for Linux, invoked by using the name Carola, a name that you can apparently configure yourself. This new assistant seems already capable to start applications, redirect audio streams, control audio and video playback, handle incoming calls, give you a weather report and more. It looks like it has access to different languages and uses the Google text-to-speech service to answer once the command is performed. Fortunately, the stuff you say is exclusively running on your computer, so you're not actually sending your voice to Google. Of course, it is not perfect yet and it can make mistakes, but it looks like it has access to replacement lists to help you refine how well it understands you. The whole code is on GitHub and you will have to compile it yourself for now, while the developers try and solve a few issues to get these packages reviewed on Fedora and probably on other distros as well. Pretty interesting stuff. The main reason why I never took to virtual assistants is because they're just a privacy nightmare, like giving your voice commands to any big tech company just seems foolish to me. But if you have a privacy-respecting alternative that runs mostly locally, then things might get interesting. Mozilla released Firefox 102 last week, and looking at the very small release notes, I didn't feel it was worth mentioning in the previous news video. But it looks like there's actually an interesting feature in that new release. Firefox can now strip query parameters in various URLs automatically. You know, these little weird nonsensical strings of characters that appear at the end of your URL after a question mark. These tracking parameters can give a ton of information about you, about your system, about your browsing history, to the website that receives them. And removing them is a good way to ensure that the places you visit aren't completely aware of everything you did before. You can enable this feature by changing the Enhanced Tracking Protection setting to Strict, something you should probably do anyway, even without this feature. Weirdly, these parameters aren't stripped from private mode browsing, so you'll have to go to About Config to enable that. I still think that this strict protection should be enabled by default. Firefox should aim at being the most private browser out there, and enabling these kinds of features is how you can retain your audience, basically. Starlabs, a manufacturer of computers running Linux, is expanding their lineup. They already had two laptops, the Starlight and the Starbook, a small light ultrabook and its more powerful variant with bigger screen sizes. And they also have the Byte, which is a small form factor desktop PC. They are now teasing the StarFighter, which is a bigger model with more powerful CPUs from AMD or Intel and a 4K display. This new laptop would use 45-watt CPUs and will have up to 64GB of RAM and 2TB of SSD storage, on top of that 10-bit matte 4K display, in a 15.6-inch form factor. There doesn't seem to be a dedicated GPU option, either from AMD or Nvidia, so let's hope they go with powerful CPUs with good integrated graphics at least. What's interesting with Starlabs is that they don't use Tongfang or Clevo chassis that they rebrand. They actually design their own black aluminum chassis themselves, and this results in really nice devices. I'll be following this closely and I'll ask them for a review unit, of course. I have a review of their Starbook on the channel if you want to see how well these devices stack up, and I know it's another card up top somewhere, but it's not my fault if every topic in this video matches a video I already made. I'm not guilty of anything here. Another laptop running Linux out of the box has been announced, by Tuxedo this time, in the form of the Pulse 15 Gen 2, which is the new revision to their 15-inch Ultrabook. It packs a newer Ryzen 7 5700U with a low TDP of 15 watts, with its integrated Radeon RX Vega graphics. This combo should give about the same performance as the previous model, which used a Ryzen 7 4800H, but at a much lower power draw, and they say battery life can reach up to 16 hours. This new version of the Pulse also packs a 1440p display, something that I find too high res for a 15-inch, but a lot of people seem to enjoy that, with a 165Hz refresh rate. The chassis looks pretty good in pictures, still using the magnesium alloy of the previous gen, so I already know it's solid, it's scratch resistant, and it's very lightweight. The laptop also packs 3 USB-A ports, an Ethernet port, a microSD card reader, a USB-C and HDMI port, and Wi-Fi 6. It can be pre-ordered today and it will ship at the end of July. Now, using the same chassis as the Pulse 15, the KDE Slimbook 4 has also been announced. It packs the same Ryzen 7 CPU but sticks with a 1080p screen and comes in two variants, a 14 and a 15-inch one. The chassis is silver with a black keyboard and it runs KDE Neon out of the box with KDE branding on the lid. Although you can also get that device without the KDE branding and with the generic Slimbook branding if you prefer, because they also sell it as the Slimbook Pro X line. Those look like amazing laptops. They're basically the evolution of the Slimbook Pro X14 that I already use, except the chassis looks a bit better this time, less tapered and more straight, a bit more modern, so I'll be asking for review units and I'll see if I can get one. Of course, there's the traditional GNOME updates, this time with Epiphany getting support for web extensions. I already touched on that last week, and the support still isn't complete since it won't support most ad blockers. But it's a really great start to make this browser more usable. libadwaita gets a new message dialog that's adaptive, so it will scale with the window size and work on mobile, and it won't depend on the GTK dialog, which means other desktops using GTK don't have to follow the same style as GNOME. GNOME software got improved support for displaying Flatpak permissions that those apps require, and the Settings app now can display the state of your device's protection using the firmware update project, reporting on kernel taint, secure boot and the like. And finally, Loop, the new image viewer, now has a gallery view, smooth image loading and swipe navigation support. Good stuff about GNOME Web and extensions, and it's nice to have that security report that might basically unearth some issues that you might not have seen before in terms of device security. All of these changes should be available in GNOME 43 in September, I think. KDE developers are also continuing their work on the next Plasma release and the new versions of their apps. Two 15-minute bugs were fixed this week, including a fix for system scaling not applying properly at first login. Spectacle, the screenshot utility, now displays the global shortcuts used to take each type of screenshot, as in full screen, a specific region, the active window, or the window behind the cursor. And the screenshot now resizes itself correctly when you want to annotate it, so you won't have to zoom out. You'll also be able to use middle click to close windows in the overview effect and in the desktop grid and in the present windows effect, so things are more consistent. The search field in the main menu is no longer slightly misaligned. The Notes widget now remembers your cursor and scroll positions after a restart, and the Task Manager widgets can be configured to not automatically use all the space available on the panels. A ton of bugs were also fixed along with some performance improvements. And as always, most of these changes will land in Plasma 5.26 or in the next KDE Gear compilation. The bug fixes might land in the current versions of Plasma in the next update. Now this time we also have some news about Linux Mint 21. The team is starting testing this weekend, and the beta should be out next week for everyone to try. Mint 21 won't use the systemd out-of-memory daemon that plagues Ubuntu 22.04. This thing makes Ubuntu close applications to free some RAM, even if some RAM is still available, so Mint won't be using that. They also worked to keep OS Prober enabled by default, so dual boot setups will work well. This was also an issue with a few recent distro releases. And there are a bunch of other changes planned for Mint 21, such as a more powerful Bluetooth configuration graphical utility, support for WebP formats on image viewers and thumbnailers, and improvements to timeshift to ensure it doesn't saturate the whole storage. Now the Mint team also reported an issue with the Mint Update tool, which enabled all systemd services and timers, and they reverted that change a few hours later after some user reports. If you have been affected by the issue, you can disable automatic updates to fix it. Of course, I'll give a good long look at Mint 21 when it's released. It's a great distribution, super easy to use, super simple for beginners, so expect a video about it. And we also have some elementary OS updates. The file manager now works more reliably when holding Shift and the arrow keys to select multiple files. And there were fixes for copying and pasting and for renaming. The file chooser will also ask you to confirm when overwriting a file. Network sidebar plugins such as Nextcloud are now added correctly to the file manager, and image thumbnails now always display centered on a card of the same background size, so they are easier to interact with and to select. The camera app now supports MJPEG cameras and will show an error message when there is no webcam available. The Tasks app now automatically syncs task lists when you select them, or when your network becomes available again after a disconnect. And newly created task lists can be created offline, even if you sync them with an online account. The printer settings received a few visual updates to be clearer, and the appearance and multitasking panels also have been redesigned to be more legible. All these updates are available on Elementary OS 6.1. And unfortunately, Elementary OS 7 is still blocked by the same issues related to its window manager, so it's not available yet, and there is yet no date for a first early access beta. Wine 7.12 was released, bringing theming support for Qt 5 applications and updating the bundled VKD3D version to let users play more DirectX 12 games. Effect support in Direct2D has been improved, and there were 13 bugs fixed, including for games like Star Citizen or Shogun Total War 2, and for programs like Wireshark, MetaTrader 4 or Approach Smart Suite. Less bug fixes than usual, but it's good to see them working on theming, so Windows apps don't look so Windows 95 anymore. And let's finish this video with a nice little gaming roundup. Things are still progressing nicely on Linux, thanks to help from the deck, from Wine, Proton and Valve. Right now, out of the top 100 games on Steam, 73 run on the deck officially, so they basically run on Linux. That includes 28 verified titles, 45 playable ones, 5 unchecked as of yet, and 22 unsupported. Note that the playable status doesn't mean the game will run poorly, just that it's not optimized for the Steam Deck specifically, but it might be perfectly fine on a more traditional computer running Linux. Less good news though, as the developers for Vermintide 2 say that enabling anti-cheat was not as easy as just ticking a checkbox and shipping a library file. It looks like they're hitting a roadblock on that one, and since most of their resources that could work on this are now working on enabling anti-cheat on Linux for Darktide, they've put that work on hold while they wait for a solution to be found. The good news is that Darktide will probably run on Linux with anti-cheat support, so that's something. Still on gaming, the share of Linux users on Steam is now 1.18% in a steady climb that puts monthly active users using Linux at 1.5 million people. That's a lot of Linux gamers, and I would expect this share to keep growing. Know that the deck is shipping faster and it has the Steam survey built in. And to top it off, the deck now has more than 3,700 games officially supported, this time including Dead Rising and Dead Rising 2, World of Warships, The Witcher Adventure Game, or Startopia. Good stuff, mostly. I can't wait to play Darktide on Linux with my friends, because yes, I do have friends. A few. I think. What I'm certain about though is this segue to today's sponsor, Tuxedo. Tuxedo is a company based in Germany. They make laptops and desktops that run Linux out of the box. You can pick from a huge range of popular distributions when you configure your device, or you can install any distro you want, because those laptops are compatible with Linux, and if there are a few tweaks that you need to apply, Tuxedo has PPAs and repositories that let you install the required packages, which is really cool. They have a wide range of devices, from the smallest ultrabooks and NUCs to the biggest gaming towers or gaming laptops, like the Stellaris 15 I just bought from them. I edit all my videos on it, and it's a dream to use. It's really powerful and really nice. And of course, each Tuxedo device has a ton of configuration options, from CPU, GPUs, RAM, storage, even getting your own lid engraved with your own logo. And you can change between many keyboard layouts, and they ship worldwide. So if you need a new device that runs Linux out of the box, check out Tuxedo using the link in the description below and buy one of their devices. They're really nice. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like the video, well, give it a dislike and tell me why in the comments as well. And if you really enjoy what I do, you can support me by clicking on the Super Thanks button underneath the video, the PayPal link in the description, or by becoming a Patreon supporter or a YouTube member. Both of them get access to a weekly podcast and the right to vote on the next topics I'll cover. So thanks everyone for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!